The story begins in the heart of Renaissance Florence, a city of splendor, ambition, and danger. Marble palaces rose along the Arno, their facades gleaming in the Italian sun. Artists, poets, and architects walked the streets alongside merchants, soldiers, and spies. It was a city of dreams, but also of secrets. And some secrets, as history would reveal, were worth more than life itself. In the year 1535, a child was born whose very existence would become a thread in the tangled web of Medici power. Her name was Giulia de' Medici, the illegitimate daughter of Alessandro de' Medici, the Duke of Florence. Alessandro, often called Il Moro for his dark complexion, ruled Florence with a mix of fear, diplomacy, and sharp intelligence. He was the first Duke of Florence, establishing a precedent for centralized Medici power, yet his court was rife with envy, betrayal, and ambition. Alessandro's life would be cut short by assassination when Giulia was still a child, leaving her a pawn in a dangerous political landscape. The circumstances of her birth were shrouded in secrecy. As the illegitimate child of the Duke, her survival depended on careful guardianship, discretion, and the goodwill of powerful allies. Rumors swirled in Florence's marble halls about her mother's identity, her father's intentions, and her future in a city obsessed with lineage and bloodlines. From the very beginning, Giulia was marked not just by her parentage but by her mixed heritage, a legacy that both distinguished her and exposed her to prejudice. Her early years were spent largely away from the public eye. After Alessandro's assassination in 1537 by Lorenzino de' Medici, a distant cousin, Giulia's life was entrusted to the care of the family loyalists who recognized the need to protect the surviving heir of Alessandro's line. Among these protectors was Cosimo I de' Medici, Alessandro's distant relative who would later become Duke and consolidate Medici power with unrelenting efficiency. Cosimo understood that Giulia, despite her illegitimacy, was a symbol, a living reminder of Alessandro's reign and of the fragile threads of Medici authority. The child grew up surrounded by tutors, guardians, and courtiers, learning the ways of Florence's elite while navigating the complexities of her own identity. She studied Latin, the arts, and the intricate politics that shaped her city. She learned to move silently among men who were accustomed to wielding power, to listen carefully, to observe the subtle signs of loyalty and danger. Every gesture, every word, could mean survival or peril. In this city, knowledge was armor, and wisdom could be sharper than any blade. By her adolescence, Giulia's presence at court became more visible. Portraits of her as a young woman, most famously by the artist Pontormo, capture her dignity and poise. The painting portrays her with careful attention to detail, the curve of her jaw, the depth of her eyes, and the solemn expression of someone who understands both privilege and precarity. In her gaze, historians see a quiet strength that would sustain her through the challenges to come. She was no ordinary girl, she was the daughter of a duke, a witness to Florence's political evolution, and a living symbol of both the city's grandeur and its dangers. The Medici court itself was a place of constant intrigue. Nobles vied for influence, allies plotted, and enemies watched for any opportunity to destabilize power. Giulia's guardians navigated these treacherous waters on her behalf. Marriage alliances were more than personal unions, they were instruments of political strategy. Every guest, every visitor, every conversation could carry the weight of life or death. It was in this environment that Giulia learned the first lessons of diplomacy, patience, observation, and the ability to wield silence as a tool. The shadows of her father's murder lingered over her life. Lorenzino's act did not merely end Alessandro's rule, it sent ripples of fear through the city. For Giulia, it was a lesson in vulnerability. She saw firsthand that power could be taken in an instant, that life could hinge on loyalty and timing. Yet in these shadows, she also learned resilience. She observed Cosimo's ascent, the way he consolidated power through strategy and force, and she internalized the lesson that survival depended on understanding the rules of a dangerous game. Her adolescence was punctuated by both education and ceremony. She attended religious functions, participated in private audiences with court officials, and observed Florence's elaborate rituals of power. Through these experiences, Giulia's identity as a Medici became inseparable from her role as a symbol of lineage and legitimacy. Despite being an illegitimate child, she carried the weight of history on her shoulders, a silent witness to the ambitions and conflicts that shaped her family. As Giulia de' Medici moved into adolescence, the world around her was transforming, and so was she. Florence, still pulsing with Renaissance brilliance, had become a city of calculated ambitions and subtle power plays. The Medici family, now firmly under Cosimo I's rule, controlled the political, economic, and cultural life of the city, but even within the palace walls, every gesture, every alliance, and every whispered conversation carried weight. Giulia, now a young woman, began to understand her place in this intricate tapestry. Her education had been rigorous. She spoke Latin fluently, read classical texts, and had been trained in the arts, music, and rhetoric. These were not mere accomplishments for a noblewoman, they were tools of survival and influence. She had learned that her voice could be as powerful as any weapon in the hands of a strategist, that knowledge could protect her where physical strength could not. Despite her illegitimacy, Giulia's father's blood granted her a position that could not be ignored. Courtiers and foreign envoys were aware of her lineage, and she became a symbol, a reminder of Alessandro de' Medici's legacy and of the fragility of power. At court, her presence was both respected and scrutinized. Allies sought to court her favor, rivals observed her movements, and she learned quickly to navigate the delicate balance between visibility and discretion. Her adolescence coincided with a period of political consolidation by Cosimo I. The Duke worked tirelessly to stabilize Florence, centralize authority, and expand Medici influence across Tuscany. Giulia's guardians, aware of the dangers that her father's assassination had revealed, ensured that she was protected but also positioned in such a way that her very existence could reinforce the legitimacy of Medici rule. Every public appearance, every introduction at a court gathering, every portrait painted of her was part of a larger strategy, one that blurred the lines between personal survival and political utility. Giulia's life was further shaped by the cultural richness of Florence. She was immersed in the art of the period, interacting with painters, sculptors, and intellectuals who frequented the Medici court. The famous portrait by Pontormo captured more than her likeness. It depicted the dignity and poise of a young woman who had grown up understanding both her vulnerability and her influence. The painting is remarkable not only for its artistic qualities but for the subtle narrative it conveys. A girl of mixed heritage, illegitimate yet noble, aware of her lineage and the precariousness of her position. It was also during these years that Giulia began to understand the realities of her racial identity. Being of mixed African and Italian descent, she faced prejudices that were rarely spoken aloud but were nevertheless present in the court's social undercurrents. Yet her intelligence, education, and the careful management of her public image allowed her to navigate these challenges. She developed a quiet strength, an inner resolve that enabled her to maintain dignity and command respect, even when others sought to undermine her. The political landscape around her continued to evolve. Florence's alliances shifted constantly, and the Medici faced threats from both internal rivals and foreign powers. Giulia's guardians, recognizing the importance of strategic marriage, sought alliances that would strengthen the family's position and secure her future. She was introduced to potential suitors not merely as a young woman of beauty, but as a living link to Alessandro de' Medici, a symbol of continuity, and a participant in Florence's intricate dance of diplomacy. Amid these pressures, Giulia's personal development was inseparable from the social and political currents of the time. She learned the art of conversation as a form of influence, the importance of silence as a shield, and the subtle ways in which loyalty and discretion could preserve life. Her intelligence and emotional resilience became her most powerful assets, allowing her to survive in an environment where even minor missteps could have catastrophic consequences. By her late teens, Giulia's presence at court had become more pronounced. She attended formal events, participated in family ceremonies, and began to take on responsibilities that were both symbolic and practical. These experiences deepened her understanding of power, loyalty, and legacy. She observed Cosimo I's strategies closely, noting how alliances were formed and broken, how influence could be gained through both generosity and intimidation, and how a single decision could ripple across the city, affecting lives and fortunes. Despite the ever-present dangers, Julia also experienced moments of humanity and connection. She formed friendships with women and children of similar standing, shared in cultural activities, and witnessed the artistic and intellectual flowering of Florence firsthand. These moments, though often fleeting, grounded her and reminded her that life was more than politics and survival. As she approached adulthood, the question of her marriage loomed large. For a woman of her status, marital alliances were not personal choices but strategic imperatives. Her eventual marriage would link her to influential families, reinforce Medici power, and provide a measure of security. Yet it was also an opportunity for Julia to exercise agency within the constraints of her circumstances, to navigate the delicate balance between duty and personal interest. By the end of Part 2, Julia had transformed from a protected child into a young woman of remarkable poise, intelligence, and resilience. She had learned to navigate the treacherous currents of Florentine politics, manage the delicate perceptions of race and lineage, and prepare herself for a life where survival depended on strategy, discretion, and courage. Her story was moving toward a stage where her actions, choices, and alliances would leave an indelible mark on Florence's history. As Julia de Medici entered adulthood, the weight of her lineage and the shadow of Florence's political intrigue shaped every choice she made. Her early education, her careful navigation of court life, and her cultivated poise prepared her for the challenges that awaited. Unlike many of her contemporaries, her role was not simply ornamental. She was a living symbol of Alessandro de Medici's line, a subtle yet potent reminder of power, legitimacy, and continuity. Her marriage, arranged with careful political calculation, linked her to influential Italian nobility. Historical records suggest that she married Bernardo de Medici, or a member of a related branch of the family, reinforcing her status within the complex Medici network. This union was more than personal. It was a strategic alliance designed to strengthen family influence and secure her future in a society where women's security and authority were largely mediated through their familial and marital connections. Even within the confines of her marriage, Julia maintained a presence marked by intelligence, dignity, and discretion. She understood the subtle power of observation, the influence of patronage, and the ways in which reputation could be shaped through careful interactions. Her home became a space where alliances could be observed, news gathered, and relationships cultivated, reflecting her understanding that influence extended beyond formal titles into the quieter realms of social capital and negotiation. Julia's racial identity, an aspect often overlooked in historical accounts, played a complex role in her social positioning. Being of mixed African and Italian descent, she navigated a society that often scrutinized lineage with exacting standards. Yet her education, refinement, and careful presentation enabled her to command respect within elite circles. Portraiture, particularly works such as Pontormo's depiction of her, communicated dignity and nobility, signaling to contemporaries and future generations alike the legitimacy and status she carried despite the challenges of her heritage. Throughout her life, Julia remained closely connected to the Medici court, witnessing firsthand the evolution of Florence under Cosimo I. The city flourished culturally and economically, but the Medici continued to consolidate power through strategic marriages, diplomacy, and, at times, ruthless enforcement of authority. Julia's position allowed her not only to observe these dynamics but also to subtly influence them, leveraging her relationships and insights to navigate the complex interplay of loyalty, ambition, and survival. She bore children who continued the Medici lineage, further intertwining her legacy with that of Florence's ruling elite. Through them, her influence persisted, ensuring that her presence, though sometimes understated, left tangible marks on the social and political landscape. Her descendants would inherit both the privileges and the expectations of Medici blood, a testament to her enduring impact on the family and the city. Despite the calculated nature of her social positioning, Julia's life also contained moments of personal agency and emotional depth. Her correspondence, where records exist, suggests a woman attuned to her circumstances but not devoid of empathy, intellect, and reflection. She navigated friendships, familial obligations, and social ceremonies with awareness, blending personal insight with the necessities imposed by her environment. Her death, occurring later in the 16th century, closed a life lived at the intersection of power, survival, and historical significance. Giulia de Medici's story, though often overshadowed by the more prominent figures of her era, illuminates the experiences of women who were both participants in and witnesses to the political currents of Renaissance Italy. She survived the perils of illegitimacy, the intricacies of racial and social prejudice, and the complex web of Medici politics, leaving behind a legacy of resilience and quiet influence. Today, historians study Giulia's life not only for the details of her biography but also for what it reveals about Florence, the Medici, and the nuanced ways in which lineage, gender, and race intersected during the Renaissance. Her existence challenges simplified narratives of history, reminding us that even those positioned on the margins of official records could shape, influence, and reflect the forces of their time. Through the eyes of Giulia de Medici, the story of Renaissance Florence becomes more vivid, nuanced, and human. She represents the intersection of power, vulnerability, and agency, a living emblem of a family that shaped Europe's cultural, political, and artistic landscape. Her legacy endures not only in portraits and historical texts but also in the continued fascination with the lives of those who navigated history's most complex courts, survived its dangers, and left a lasting mark on the world. The camera would linger on Pontormo's portrait of her, capturing the solemnity, intelligence, and dignity in her gaze. As the narration concludes, the viewer is left with the understanding that Giulia de Medici's life was both extraordinary and emblematic of the many unseen threads that wove the tapestry of Renaissance Italy.